Growing up, I loved Injustice: Gods Among Us. It was one of my favorite superhero games, hands down, and it really got me into that fighter, Mortal Kombat-esque fighting or play style that we see in the game. I got really good at the game at one point, but I also just loved the story in general. Now, when Injustice 2 came out, I was obsessed with that game as well, but nowhere near to the competitive side that I was with Injustice 1. I was super cracked on Injustice 1. Now, if you told me to 1v1 now, you'd probably obliterate me, because I suck. But that's beyond the point. But another series of superhero games that I absolutely love is the Arkham series, Arkham Batman series, in fact. And I loved it because, frankly, I didn't even necessarily play the Arkham Batman games that much. I sat there and I watched my brother, my older brother, play throughout the entirety of most, if not all, of the games. I thought the storyline, the action, the free roam, and all of it was so amazing and so beyond its time. And it continued to amaze me throughout the entirety of the entire Arkham franchise, barring that one game, Suicide Squad to kill the Justice League. But yeah, we won't talk too much about that one. I wish I could forget about it forever. Now, with that said, I was thinking, what would have happened if you actually put Arkham Batman in, well, Injustice: Gods Among Us? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Could Arkham Batman actually survive Injustice: Gods Among Us? As always, the story would start at the very beginning, Superman actually killing the Joker. Now, this would be our intro into Injustice: Gods Among Us, but this is not the Batman we'll necessarily even be following, because that Batman is from a different Earth, but we'll be replacing, well, the Batman we know at the very beginning of the game, in terms of the one who fights, or we utilize in the beginning of the game, in the first chapter, is the main Batman we normally deal with. But this time around, I'm going to be swapping him out with our very own Arkham Batman. Now, for those who don't know, Arkham Batman has a plethora of things at his disposal. So we'll talk about that briefly, but it really doesn't matter to a large extent because this game is a little bit different than your normal game. But still, it's more or less worth to actually talk about in terms of gadgets and so on. So he has the normal stuff a Batman would have because we are replacing him with a Batman, so it's a Batman v Batman swap. So stuff like the bat claw, the batarangs, the scanners, and tons of ways to hack or break into areas. But on top of that, he has some crazy things that a normal or Injustice Batman doesn't necessarily show, or at least that version of Injustice Batman doesn't necessarily show. Stuff like detective mode, maybe even like a better explosive batarang, explosive gel, a freeze blast grenade, glue grenades, grapple or crazy grapple guns and stuff like that. On top of that, I mean, we can talk about him having a ramped up Batmobile or a Bat Tank, something that has way more on it than the original Batman. Normally the super move that we see Batman use is with his Batmobile, but it's really just running somebody over. This Bat Tank could definitely help in the near future. But the main difference, and I'm sure some of you already know what I'm going to say, is the fear toxin. We know that this Batman has massive fear manipulation, and he is the fear bat. We see it in Suicide Squad to kill the Justice League, but also at the very end of what a lot of people know as the true ending of Arkham, or what they want to say is the true ending of Arkham Batman. Now, with all that said, let's kind of get into what type of fights this version of Batman will take. And right before we get into it, I want to make it very clear. This isn't necessarily Injustice Batman we're swapping him with. The Injustice Batman is actually the one that they get transported more or less to, or the one that transports everyone there. That is the technical Injustice Batman. This one is from a different Earth. The one we're swapping him with is from a different Earth. And we'll get to why I even bring that up, because Injustice Batman is pretty damn good. Now, let's start with the very first one and the very first scene, and that's with actually this Batman getting notice that supposedly the Joker has been completely silent and more or less has gotten some info from one of the Robins, and he heads over to see that actually Joker's place is completely rigged to explode. He neutralizes what he needs to neutralize in terms of a tripwire, then noticing that Joker has escaped, and, well, there's somebody ready and waiting for him, and that would be Deathstroke. Now, I'm going to talk very briefly about some of these fights, because, frankly enough, this fight isn't necessarily even close. When he faces down Deathstroke, I mean, he could easily defeat this version of Deathstroke with not a hard time at all. Like, it's not even that close, because we've seen him not only defeat a Deathstroke that has very similar feats to this one, but this one isn't part of the technical Injustice verse, or more or less part of the other Earth. We see that Deathstroke go head to head with someone like Wonder Woman, and some of, well, the crazier feats that he's done are Wonder Woman, the Flash, Cyborg, and even someone like Shazam, but this version is not the same person. So he also is lacking the kryptonite pill, which we will talk about a little bit later, but it doesn't necessarily even apply to this version at the moment. So we won't talk about the kryptonite pill until a little bit later on. This is when Batman would head over to the Watchtower, and you could make some arguments that Arkham Batman would have no clue to how to even get up there, but come on, he's more or less a genius to an extent, so I'm sure he could figure it out. Even though he was placed in a brand new world, I'm sure he would be able to figure out what that version of Batman's head was at and how to teleport, aka go over to the Watchtower. And there is like an encryption that he has to break, but he has tons of things that allow him to hack and break into areas, so this version of Batman should be able to do so. Now, how quick, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to scale that necessarily, but he would be able to get into the Watchtower. And the first person he faces off in the Watchtower actually isn't Lex Luthor. It is Bane, who jumps to basically want to fight Batman as soon as possible. But we have seen Batman take on a version of Bane before, and this version of Bane isn't even on the same level, in my opinion, as some of the other versions of Bane. I mean, we have a Bane in Arkham Asylum that is ramped up with Titan. That version of Bane was very, very strong, physically strong at least, being able to throw Batman through a literal brick wall or a stone wall. But this version of Bane, even if you could scale him to something similar, this Batman has so many more gadgets, so much more equipment. At the peak of Arkham, he would be able to easily defeat this version of Bane, and you're going to see that that's a pretty common occurrence until we get into the realm of the next planet. That's why I brought up the whole kryptonite pills, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Bane is more or less fodder here, and is easily defeated. Batman could cut off the tubes with some batarangs or some high-tech equipment or anything like that. I mean, he has all the equipment to do so. Now, when he faces off with Lex Luthor, it is an interesting fight because we don't see Arkham Batman face off against Lex Luthor, but this could be something where we see Batman use his mass amount of equipment, stuff like the explosive batarang, that is even stronger probably in Arkham than it is in Injustice, explosive gel, maybe a freeze blast or glue grenade, some of these crazy weaponries that Batman has shown. He's shown quite a bit of more or less equipment throughout the entirety of Arkham, so being able to neutralize the suit that more or less Lex Luthor is utilizing isn't too out of the question. But I will say Lex Luthor might actually give him a good little bit of trouble just because Arkham Batman doesn't know that much about him. Maybe in the future he did learn about or more about Lex Luthor, maybe in Suicide Squad to Kill the Justice League, but outside of that, he doesn't know that much. Now, with that said, if I do give Arkham Batman the suit that he basically has in Suicide Squad to Kill the Justice League, it is pretty damn tanky. We've seen that suit is actually pretty darn powerful, at least in terms of being able to tank damage, so his durability would be pretty up there when fighting Lex Luthor, and I think Batman would be able to find a way to more or less subdue him entirely and defeat him. Now, this would lead to the normal play of events. Now, this is where things get spicy, at least to a certain extent, and I'm sure some of you have been waiting for me to get past this point because it's like, well, this point doesn't necessarily matter, at least to the story. This is where Batman and everybody tries to stop the Joker from blowing up Metropolis. Now, they all run to try and do so, but they're all teleported away, and even Arkham Batman is completely shocked to see this dystopian world that is surrounding him, but the next person he would face off with is the Joker. And this fight is an easy one, and this will be the last quote-unquote easy one that I reference, because this is a Joker without the kryptonite pills, and this is a Joker that I'm sure Arkham Batman would be able to beat down senseless, because he has taken on a Joker that is probably far stronger than this one we're looking at least at the moment, the one we're looking at this moment. He took on a Titan Joker, a Joker that has basically infiltrated his mind and so on and so forth. I mean, we've seen some crazy things, so the Joker, or this version of him, does not scare me one bit, but we all know how this thing ends and how this thing would wrap up, because he would defeat him and then eventually would have to escape, because all of these more or less police quote-unquote officers would show up, because, well, Batman's part of the insurgency and they think that that is the Batman they need to capture. This version of Batman would easily be able to get out and easily be able to leave at this point. And I will say this and bring this up, we probably will get no use out of the Batmobile or Bat Tank. I would have to take quite a few liberties to actually bring those items to this world. So honestly, I probably will be rid of that. But in terms of the fear toxin that Batman has, or fear toxin Batman, I mean, we are definitely utilizing that, and you'll see why very, very soon. Because eventually they will have to try and get the other Batman out of capture. And when they go and do this, he takes on quite a few powerful foes. And the reason why they're so powerful is because of the super pill, or the kryptonite super pill, which gives the person superhuman-like strength and durability. You see, it's not specifically stated who exactly takes the pills, but we can make the assumption that the regime, aka Superman's lackeys, more or less have taken this pill. People like Catwoman and Damian Wayne, who will be our next two fights, have definitely taken, in my opinion, these kryptonite pills, because, well, they are normal humans. I mean, they would need them the most. Now, not everybody else would need them. Someone like Wonder Woman would never take it, because why would she need it? She's already an Amazonian. Now, let's talk about the Catwoman fight. Now, the only thing that makes this fight competitive is the kryptonite pill. There's a good chance that Arkham Batman actually has a bit of a struggle with Catwoman because of a kryptonite pill. But like I've said before, he has quite a bit of different equipment that could definitely be used in this regard, and Catwoman is definitely not fully mentally strong. So if he does decide to use the fear toxin on her, there's a good chance that she falls very easily. But before I even go on to the next fight, we'll talk about this. What would have happened if he actually took the kryptonite pill himself, seeing that, well, everyone else has it and he feels that he needs it as well? If he does, an even fight between Catwoman on a kryptonite pill and Batman, Arkham Batman, on a kryptonite pill is not a close one. Arkham Batman would whoop her really badly, and I just want to make that and preference that very, very largely, because those are certain things that truly matter to this kind of story, you could call it, but this kind of quote-unquote breakdown. Now, I still think he could best her without the pill. I mean, we've seen him best some very, very, very strong foes even without artificial help. So there's a good chance that he can defeat her just through his understanding of martial arts and understanding of how she fights specifically. And this version of Arkham Batman is very strong. And especially if we give him the powers that Brainiac would have given him, it would have made him even stronger. We won't do that necessarily, though. I don't even like the idea of giving him that type of power, because that's not even Batman. That's a completely controlled version of Batman. But still, I think he could definitely beat Catwoman without the super pill or without the kryptonite pill. And that goes very, very similar to one Damian Wayne, because, well, for one, Arkham Batman doesn't necessarily know Damian Wayne, but we know that Damian Wayne, out of guilt, basically takes on very similar fighting style to one Nightwing. And, well, Arkham Batman knows quite a bit about Mr. Nightwing, so he would be able to, more or less, take down that fighting style drastically. And even without a kryptonite pill, if he has to use the fear toxin, Damian Wayne would see some gnarly things. Like, he already has massive guilt from the death of Nightwing, so there's a good chance that he sees some very bad things within his mind. I mean, we saw that Diana was affected by it, and you can make the argument that Damian probably holds more guilt than even Diana herself, just because Damian did kill his so-called or pseudo brother, which is a very sad thing, but is the truth. Now, I do think Batman defeats him, either via fear toxin, or if he has the kryptonite pill, he definitely would outskill Damian by a large margin, and, well, even without the kryptonite pill, he probably would outskill him just by understanding the fight style of one Nightwing. Now, the next fight would be right when they actually get the Injustice Batman out of prison, which would be a mind-controlled Green Arrow, and we know for sure the mind-controlled Green Arrow is on the super pill. I believe, if at least to my knowledge, he actually does fight people with the super pill, or the kryptonite pill, which would even the odds against someone like Black Adam or Solomon Grundy. So we definitely know Green Arrow took the pill. So how would this fight go? Well, in terms of tactics, we know Batman is definitely beyond Green Arrow, and Green Arrow is trying to resist a mind control. So you can make an argument that he could actually beat Green Arrow without the kryptonite pill because of resistance to the mind control. And if he had to utilize the fear toxin, I mean, it probably would kind of intermeld with the mind control, releasing him to an extent and probably getting him out of it. So the mind control Green Arrow shouldn't be too hard in terms of a fight, but the hardest fight, actually one of the hardest fights, is going to be the last two fights. The last two fights are hands down, in my opinion, the hardest fights. That would be Yellow Lantern Hal Jordan to start with. Yellow Lantern Hal Jordan is a sketchy one, because without Kryptonite Pill, I truly believe Arkham Batman would lose. Yes, this Yellow Lantern Hal Jordan is probably or most likely weaker than his Green Lantern, and some of you are probably like, well, that makes no sense, then why would he go yellow? And I get it, I hear you, but it's been stated multiple times that Green Lantern is up there, if not the strongest Green Lantern. So we know that his Green Lantern state could be or is far stronger than his Yellow Lantern, just based off of it's all remedied by fear. Now, I could see how Jordan being very susceptible to the fear toxin, mostly because of massive guilt. We know that Hal Jordan ends up feeling a certain way about certain things that would eventually occur, and would feel a certain way about some ideals that Superman would bring up later on. So we know Hal Jordan does have some morality still within him, and we even see that toward the end when he eventually becomes a Green Lantern again in Injustice 2. So it wouldn't surprise me if the fear toxin worked its wonders on Yellow Lantern Hal Jordan. But in a straight up fight without the kryptonite pill, I don't think Arkham Batman could actually defeat a Yellow Lantern Hal Jordan, being that he's very powerful. But in terms of durability, we know that the suit is more or less strong enough to tank some of these constructs that a Yellow Lantern Hal Jordan could actually reveal. But other than that, a kryptonite pill would definitely even the playing field, as we've seen far more over and over again. And if you stack the fear toxin on top of that, well, we know that this Arkham Batman should theoretically beat this Yellow Lantern Hal Jordan, depending on where his morality stance truly is at this point. So I do think this is a way closer fight than any of the other fights, but I do think there is a world where Arkham Batman does win, but there's also, in my opinion, a world where Yellow Lantern Hal Jordan wins if he's not as susceptible to the fear toxin, because maybe his morality is not truly in check just yet, and if Batman doesn't have the kryptonite pill and decides, oh well, I'm not going to use this little pill, it could hurt me, it could whatever, I think Yellow Lantern Hal Jordan has a good chance at defeating this version of Batman. And you may be wondering, I mean, we talked about, or I was talking about how these last two fights are the hardest and the strongest for Batman. And I'm dead serious when I say that, because we have Batman versus Batman. Because Injustice Batman is extremely powerful. I think people forget how strong he is and how durable he truly is. He's shown massive feats in terms of durability. But one thing that Injustice Gods Among Us Batman, in my opinion, has a detriment on is his mental fortitude. And it might sound crazy talking about Batman in that way, but it is more or less true. In Injustice 2, his mental fortitude is way better, in my opinion, because he's kind of gone through this already and he's dealt with it. But at the same time, in this Injustice, Batman has been doing things practically on his own. He's watched his team, his people that he cares about, and everything crumble and crash and burn around him. But the Arkham Batman version right now isn't necessarily at that state, and, well, he has the fear toxin that could derive this Injustice Batman to that next level of fear and arguably defeat him, especially if they're both on super pills or both on equal footing in terms of the kryptonite pill. Now, with that said, I think this future Batman is extremely skilled, like more skilled than even Arkham Batman, because we know that this future Batman is pretty damn experienced in almost every situation you can possibly even imagine. So I could definitely see this Injustice Batman actually being able to take down Arkham Batman, but it's definitely a questionable fight. Just like the Hal Jordan fight, I think it's extremely questionable. And the only reason I would even give the edge to an Arkham Batman was because Injustice 1, or Injustice Gods Among Us, Batman just isn't as mentally strong to more or less take on the fear toxin as well as Injustice 2 would have been. So this version of Batman, I think, would be a little bit more susceptible. But if you sit there and you say, hey, I don't think he's going to be as susceptible as you think, and I think Injustice Batman would take down Arkham Batman, I would not be opposed to you saying that. I think that's definitely a way I could for sure see this version of a future Batman actually defeating Arkham Batman. Because I'm not going to lie, the world of Injustice is an interesting one, because we are dealing with, one is a open world type of game where you can literally see the gadgets and the fighting and stuff like that. But with Injustice, it's a little skewered. I'm not gonna lie. The normal characters that you see that would never beat certain characters unless under specific circumstances tend to actually beat other characters. I mean, we literally see Deathstroke beat Shazam, Wonder Woman, and The Flash. And yes, I know some of you are probably like, well, in the comics, Deathstroke has been, and yeah, I know, I understand that. But let's be honest, I mean, Deathstroke versus The Flash, Shazam, and Wonder Woman, you would think that he wouldn't be able to get out of that type of fight unscathed, or he wouldn't be able to efficiently, more or less, pick apart them as easily as he kind of did in Injustice Gods Among Us. But as we know, these games are built and scaled far differently. So I would love to hear what you guys have to think. In terms of Arkham Batman, how do you think he would run the gauntlet? Do you think he would be able to run through everybody and defeat them? Maybe you have some ideas of the reasons why you think that way. Do you think Arkham Batman would fall right on his face and lose to a multitude of these people? I would love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section below. As always, I am a comic casual, so there might have been some things that I left out, and there might have been some things that I'm missing or I forgot or so on. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And as always, if you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below. And YouTube thinks you may enjoy this video, so you might as well go click on it right now.